Welcome to Vision Chats, where the only thing that matters is the future. I am Farouk Day, Vice Provost at Johns Hopkins University, and I am so honored today to be with Dr. Freeman Hrabowski, beloved longtime president of the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, UMBC. President Hrabowski, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you. I'm delighted, absolutely delighted, Farouk. Thank you.
So excited you accepted this invitation. We have so much to talk about, but let me just share a little bit about you with our audience today. You have been at UMBC for the last 30 years, leading it to its greatest accomplishments, and I'm sure there will be many more in the future. And you have been recognized around the country and the world for the tremendous impact that you've had on students. You have been named by the U.S. News and World Report and also by the Time magazine as one of the best leaders in higher learning and higher education for all of the impact that you've had on students. You've created the Merit Scholarship Program, our scholars program, to engage students, particularly underrepresented minority students, in advanced degrees in research and in science and engineering. You have done so much for UMBC, and UMBC has gone up the ranks under your leadership. You've been recognized all around the country. I want to start first with the pivotal moments in your own life, in your career, that have led you to this point, especially now that you have announced that you will be retiring from UMBC as president, which I'm sure is a point of sadness for the community. And you look back and you reflect, what has led you to this point, and what are some of the pivotal moments in your life?
Great. I'm delighted to talk about that, Farouk. And congratulations to you on this show and the fact that people enjoy having conversations with you through this. Let me just start by saying today is a pivotal point because our first Meyerhoff became a Howard Hughes investigator. I'm so proud of him that talk about pivotal points in my life. Under 1/10 of 1% of the Howard Hughes investigators in America are Black, literally under 1/10 of 1%. His name is Kafri Zarasa. He's a Meyerhoff scholar who went on and got an MD PhD from Duke and is now tenured faculty there and won the Neuroscience Award 2 years ago. But it is significant that we are working to produce more people of color who will be the most prestigious in the academy. And our goal, let me just say this, is to produce the first Black who gets the Nobel Prize in Science or Medicine in the world. Just as we've just created the first Black woman to create a vaccine in the world, Dr. Kizzmekia Corbett, who just went to Harvard. So when people ask me about myself, the first thing I think about, I hate to tell you, my students. That is the significance of whatever legacy I will have. And I give you those two to think about. For me, I would say always childhood experiences matter. And so going to jail with Dr. King, being in that march in 1963 when I was 12 and spending a week in jail, and having the chance to hear that great leader say, tomorrow can be better than today if you believe you can change the world. Think about that. So it was pivotal to believe I didn't always have to go to schools where we had hand-me-down books or go in a back door, that I could be a part of the change through my actions, even as a 12-year-old. That was wonderful in laying a foundation of what my parents, what my church, what the community had said about you can be twice as good and you can go far in spite of the structural discrimination, in spite of the unfairness, you can make it. So that was pivotal. And then my beloved Hampton, being at Hampton was an amazing experience. Having seen my first Black PhD, a mathematician, in a summer NSF, National Science Foundation program at Tuskegee, when I was in high school, and saying, wow, that's what I want to do. I want to get a PhD. So I started at age 13. I literally would say in the morning to my little fat face, good morning, Dr. Hrabowski. Because why? Because this guy could solve problems we could not solve. And I would always love math. And the idea of exciting students about not just the math, but the possibility that they had it within them to solve the problem. That was the way I began to think about this guy who was a PhD. And so those were pivotal moments. And then the Hampton experience, seeing so many people of color who were researchers, scientists, and who cared about us. The Illinois experience was powerful because I was the only one looking like me in my classes, which had been the case when my parents sent me to Massachusetts in the summers, to Springfield. And when no kids would talk to me, when the teachers wouldn't speak to me, when they'd look right through me, learning what it meant to be the invisible man, learning, as my parents said, though I couldn't allow myself simply to be a victim, getting to Illinois and seeing that people didn't expect me to be the person in the math graduate class. All those were experiences that gave me strength, that taught me not to allow others to define who I am. And then working in a couple of HBCUs, spending a number of years as a young dean at Coppin, where kids were often first generation college and had so much talent, and seeing what we could do. And then finally coming to UMBC 30 years ago and working with an amazing community of scholars who dreamed, as I did, that we could produce large numbers of people from all races who could excel across disciplines. The area you hear about most will be in the sciences, because that's where most Americans do least well, but to have people performing well across disciplines. And the final point I would make is that the significance of UMBC and this experience has been, you don't have to be rich to be the very best. You don't have to be rich to be the very best, because we send that message through TV shows, through everything. There's certain names of very prestigious universities that you see on the sweatshirts everywhere. And if you're the best, you're supposed to go to one of those. Now, it's fine. We send a lot of students to grad programs in the most socially prestigious, from Harvard to Stanford. That's fine. But I love the fact that we're sending a message through the products we are giving to the society, that you can be the very best coming from a middle class university. And that's been pivotal in my experience, being able to say to students, you have the power to change the world.
What you're doing here is really influencing self-efficacy. You're instilling confidence in students. Is there a moment that you see in the student's life in the university where that happens, and potentially when that can be missed by the university, by the educator? It sounds like it's a really pivotal moment for the student. And if they're lucky enough to have it from someone like you or your educators, then that's great. But for all of these universities, how do we ensure that those pivotal moments are available at scale, that everybody gets them?
It's an excellent, you've got grounding in the social sciences somewhere. It's very interesting. You asked, your response is very impressive. I mean, it's absolutely the case that it is about building a sense of self. My colleagues and I have our latest book is entitled The Empowered University. And the subtitle is Shared Governance, Shared Leadership, Culture Change, and Academic Success. And the first sentence in the book says, it's not about me, it's about us. That we tend to think, first of all, when we think about leadership, we think about the one person at the head of the country or the university, as opposed to thinking about all of us as leaders with a collective vision. And that vision, I would say, my colleagues would say, must be that we develop that sense of self in our students, undergrad through grad. Teachers, the power of faculty and educators, staff and faculty are educators. And the power of that person in that leadership, more advantaged position is stronger than most people realize. When a professor or a counselor or an advisor says to a student, you can do this. We believe in you. We accepted you because we believe in you. It is amazing how much impact that one authentic statement of belief in that person can do, how much that can do to have the student say, yes, I can do this. Yes, I can do this. And what I'm excited about on my campus is that people know they have that influence. And so it's not just by chance. We work really hard to get students ready for a world that can be very hard. Whether the student is first generation college, student is of any race, from any part of the world, to know that a young man or woman, LGBTQ, all of them will face times when people will try to marginalize them. And it's very important for them to have that strength that says, no, you're not going to define who I am. And you cannot define me by what you see externally. I must define who I am. And that's so the idea of the self-efficacy and the building that sense of self and building a community of people who take great pride in doing that for students, it seems to me is by far the best part of the UMBC experience.
Yeah, and it needs to happen by design. It can't, I mean, some of it might happen by chance, and there's always a sense of chance in what we do, but a lot of it has to be by design to ensure that it hits everyone. It's interesting that as when you were describing your own pivotal moments, what was clear to me is that you were talking about experiences and relationships. Those were that's what made them pivotal is the experience of going to that march, of being spat on being locked up in jail, and all the other experiences too. But that one stands out to me specifically because I heard you say that your parents wouldn't let you go to it at first, and then somehow they were convinced that they should. And I couldn't help but think, what would have your life been had you not gone? Had they stood their ground and said, "You're not going"?
I would have. It's such a great question. Nobody's ever asked me that before. By the way, go ahead. But I mean, that's a fascinating.
Well, I really want to know the answer, particularly. I mean, about you, but particularly about what would students' lives be if they don't have these transformative experiences that give them these pivotal moments.
Sure, and that's the larger point here, that we need to help students to have the chance to follow their path, to experiment within limits, of course, but to believe that they have some, you use the term self-efficacy, that they can make a decision even when they're 12, understanding there may be consequences. Yeah, you're going to go to jail. That's not going to be the best experience or whatever. But most important, it is having the chance to have the substantive conversations. My parents were both people who had protested themselves. My mother was fired from her job. I'm so proud of her, in the late 40s, for leading the protest for the equalization of teacher salaries in small town in Alabama, because teachers, Black teachers, colored teachers, they were paid about 60% of the salary of the typical white teacher with the same education, bachelor's or master's, and she was a rebel. I loved it. And that's when I could, and she was proud that she was proud, because another system picked her up, the Birmingham system. But what was amazing was she was so proud of it. And I said, "Mom, how you get to me? I can't do it when you did it." And she said, "Yeah, but I was grown. You're 12. I said, "Yeah, but you taught me to think. And I think that, and I just said, and we're all Christians. You got to believe that God will take care of me, right? It was amazing. And it was that next morning they came in after crying and said they prayed, and we're not happy, but if this is what you want to do, we'll let you. Well, that showed me their confidence in me. And that was helpful to me, because quite frankly, I tell my students, they'll say, "Oh, Doc, you must have been really courageous." I was not courageous at all. If a fight started somewhere, Freeman was running the other way. All right. The only thing I ever attacked was a math problem. Remember that. Remember this chubby little nerdy Black kid, all right, who loved math. That was it. But I did want a better education. But it was their confidence in me that led me to do it. My cousin, who lived with us, was laughing at me. He kept saying, "Those dogs are going to bite you." That's right. He just kept on messing with me. And I was trying to be brave. And it worked out okay. But the idea, the larger point, we must believe in our children and give them opportunities to show what they can do.
And if you didn't go, what would your life have been?
I would have always wondered. I would have just said, what difference could I have made? What would be the lessons I did not learn? And I have had friends whose parents didn't let them go, who said, "I wish I could have been a part of that experience," because it was a part of history. It was history. The Children's Crusade was a part of history. I will tell you, I've been back to my city, to my home city, and I don't know now, but several years ago, they still had not put the Children's Crusade in the Alabama history books. So, I mean, it is a challenge. Maybe now they have. I need to look and see if they're in those history books now. And the argument was, well, if you tell kids today about that, that will make them angry. No, we are doomed to repeat the challenges if we don't deal with the challenges. And children need to know that children 50 years ago were marching for the future generation of children.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And the worst regrets are the ones about omission, about what we have not done, not
Yeah,
what we have done and perhaps
sure,
failed.
sure.
So I agree with you on that. It's interesting that that first pivotal moment was was anchored in social justice
Oh yeah.
movement and issues.
Oh, yeah.
And then you look at throughout your entire career and your life and all of the work that you've done, where we are today in 2021, and all of that has happened, and especially during this last year of the pandemic and the social justice movement and the advances that we might have made or might not have made. Where are we today, and I would love to hear your reflections about the hope, the opportunities, the challenges we're still running. Are we still behind in a lot of things that we're dealing with? And what we experienced last year during a pandemic with the murder of George Floyd, and how that seemed to have shifted the narrative finally, perhaps. And
Well, go ahead. Go ahead. No, you.
are we close enough? We're not yet.
No, I would say we have a long way to go. We are talking more of the talk. We've yet to walk more of the walk. That sounds trite, but the fact is that I wrote a piece for The Atlantic on how higher education must address issues of racism. We're all concerned about what happens in media. We're concerned when we see the people protesting in the streets or car burning and all of that. But when things become calm again and nobody's talking about these issues, notice that the actions are not necessarily continuing to focus on improving the situation. I would argue that we have substantive conversations, many more to have in this country. Because when people say, oh, it's better now, that just means there's no uprising. That has nothing to do with structural discrimination or structural racism. And this is not my saying it emotionally. If you look at any of the studies from the National Academy of Sciences, these things are real. And when we look at higher education, we tend to be very good about critiquing society, but we rarely take the time to critique ourselves. The fact is that the vast majority of the professoriate will still be white in almost all institutions. And that is not trying to take a job from someone. It is to say that we need to see more people of color in our institutions, whether at the student level, staff, but especially in the professoriate, if we are to make the progress in our society that we need to make. Now, my campus is one, I was telling you, that has both the international and domestic diversity, with a large percentage of students who have a parent from another country. And yet we lead the country in producing Blacks who go on to get science PhDs and MD PhDs. And yet we would be the first to say we need more people of color on the faculty, more African Americans, more Latinos. We've got a number of Asian faculty in certain disciplines, need more in some others, and more Hispanic, Latinx faculty, and more Black faculty. There's no doubt. And as soon sometimes as we promote people to the top levels, they get great jobs, either moving to deanship, as several have done for us recently, women and people of color. We become this low-hanging fruit. Oh, great people at UMBC, and they don't pay but so much. Let's get them. And so that's a challenge. But also, I think needing to have even more here who can keep more here, as a campus. I don't know a university that's not one of the, for example, HBCUs and maybe some of the Hispanic serving institutions, and we are a minority serving institution, but mainly because of the Asian population. Mm-hmm. We are about 18-19% Black. We are 20-some% Asian, probably 7 or 8% Hispanic. So we are maybe 40% white, 60% of color, but about 18% Black. But we know we need more minority faculty members. I don't know a university of our type that shouldn't be saying we need more representation. And that is that's just symbolic of the structural discrimination challenge we face in our society. Because when you look not just at the professoriate, when you look at the national infrastructure, NIH, NSF, NASA, you're going to see that fewer than 2% of the scientists are Black, fewer than 2%. All right. But Latinos is slightly more, but not much. And think about national infrastructure. But beyond that, when you go into arts, humanities, and social sciences, we still don't see the number of people at the top from the different populations. And why is that important? If you want to make sure you're being sensitive to the issues of people from different groups, you've got to have people from those groups in the room, at the table, having the conversations. And so as we face this public health crisis, we know we need many more people from underrepresented groups in the professoriate, but also in professional positions of all types. That's why I mentioned Dr. Kizzmekia Corbett, who had an undergrad major in sociology and biology from here, and then Chapel Hill PhD, and created the vaccine with Dr. Graham at NIH. But it was so helpful for people to see that a Black was involved in the creation of the mRNA for that vaccine, as people have such a lack of trust. You see, we need many more people like that who are in public health, are in different aspects of the larger society, if we're going to have people trusting. And until that happens, all of that structural discrimination I talked about is just there. It's there with nobody calling it out. Because if I'm in a room and everybody looks like me, and quite frankly, I'm comfortable, I don't see a problem. And it's not that I'm not a good person. It's just I don't see a problem. It's only when you have some women in the room with all men that issues involving women become important. Same thing for every group that's different. And so when thinking about where we are as a society, I would say we don't have enough people of color or women in certain rooms who can help with policy decisions in making a difference. We've made some progress on the political side, at least, but when it comes to the professionals and people with the PhDs, or people in technology, people in science, but people involved in ethical issues, the rooms tend to be fairly heterogeneous. It is a challenge.
I think what you're making me think is that what we already know, that representation matters, and representation is lacking in higher education. The second step of that is, when we have representation, how do we ensure that the gaps aren't there, that the experience is also equitable, that these people who are representing different groups are also thriving in those jobs?
Yes.
Just as much as we work hard to recruit faculty and professional staff to administrators to these universities, how do we make sure that we retain them? Because often they leave if they don't feel like they belong, that they have a voice, that they have to adjust or change who they are in order to be successful. Is that something you ran into, or that I'm sure you've thought a lot about it? Where do we go from here?
No, we need to create environments in which people can say what they really think.
Yeah.
Not just what they think they have to say in order to be okay in the environment. And so, I mean, it's something we work on quite a bit, whether talking about the Equity and Inclusion Council or the other efforts involving inclusion in different parts of the university. When we think about placing people in particularly powerful positions. I'm very proud. We have our first woman and first dean of a college, of an academic college, in arts, humanities, and social sciences, Dr. Kimberly Moffitt, who is an expert on Michelle Obama, whose last book was on Michelle Obama. But that's very unusual for us that we've moved to that level. We had appointed a wonderful full professor, African-American male, as one of our associate provosts, but he just got a job as a dean within a year and moved up to Massachusetts. And so, again, it's that issue of you bring in people, you want to support people, and often when they're great, they get plucked off before you get started. But you have to keep doing it. And most important, though, the people who are in positions, especially those in departments, because you're not going to have but so many people in an academic department who will be different. How do we help them to feel comfortable about the environment, and to give people from different groups a chance to have conversations about what works well and what doesn't work well? I think it is about creating an environment that says we need to hear what you really think. And if it's not working for you, let us know what the challenge is and how can we be helpful? Because most people are good people and they really do want to make a difference. But it's difficult to bring about change in the academy just because so many people are comfortable with the way things are. But having that level of honesty in talking about how welcoming an environment is or is not is very important. It really is very important. Yes.
I know many of us have been talking for years about the changes that higher education need to have in order to create the real transformation for in society and for students of all backgrounds. And I must not be the only one who thought that perhaps the pandemic this last year might have been the opportunity, despite the tragedy around it, the opportunity for higher education to finally get over that hump and transform. We are an industry of tradition after all, so it's hard for us to change really quickly.
Yes.
Yet I think at this point it feels that perhaps we're slowing down as universities and colleges. Maybe we're holding on to the things that we don't want to lose. I'd love to hear your reflections about this last year, the challenges that we've gone through, what needs to happen in the future. And most importantly, I think I'm most interested in the disruptions that are necessary. I mean, we've had to go through a disruption by force with this pandemic, but I think now we have an opportunity to create disruptions internally in order to really reimagine how higher learning can be, or higher education can be, of service to all students, regardless of backgrounds and social capital.
Great question. I mean, the ineluctable question is, do people really want to change? And I would say some do. Some think there's a need for change. Many are comfortable with the way things are. Good people. And use of technology, for example. What is the future? Well, it's going to be certainly more of a hybrid than it's ever been before. We are on our campus at UMBC, 25 to 30% of the classes right now are still online or hybrid, which is far more than we had before for a number of reasons. And there are groups of students who prefer that in particular disciplines. Well, we're looking at that. We're working on another, my colleagues and I are working on another book to follow the Empowered University with Hopkins Press, by the way, that focuses on what comes next. It's the future of higher education, not just for UMBC, but in general. And you've just made some very good points. We changed because we had to for a while. Now people are talking about the new normal. Well, we want to even question that term, the new normal. Because does that mean it's back to regular and just tweak a little bit? Is that what the new normal means? Or is it an opportunity we want to take advantage of by making some transformational change? Transformational change in a university or in a society usually will be more than people could possibly imagine. Mm-hmm. Let me just stop for a minute. Before the pandemic, we had a certain number of young people being killed in cities every day. After the pandemic, maybe the same number, slightly more, across the country. And yet, think about it. Do you hear an outcry about the fact that you got all these young males of color heavily being killed? I mean, when is the last time you've heard an outcry saying this is the normal in America right now? You know, when there is a major slaughter of some kind of a number of people for a day or two, you hear something. And understandably, when the police do it, you hear something, as you should. Okay. But every day, Americans see young people, usually males of color, killed. And nothing is said or done. I know everybody is wanting to work on it. I'm very proud of our mayor. He's working on this, just had this new plan involving prevention. Very proud of that. And they're going to work on it. But I'm saying a part of structural discrimination involves the psyche, the mindset. We are so accustomed to things being one way, and that is this happening, that it's not a big deal. Nobody says, oh my God, how could this be happening in America every day? That is the kind of deeply rooted structural discrimination now, and it's going to take a lot to transform that. Okay, now go back to higher education and the same issue. We talk about it in my TED Talk. I talk about the fact that the 4 pillars of college success in science, because most people don't make it in science in this country. And the more prestigious the university, socially prestigious, the greater the chance the student, the freshman who starts off in science, leaves it within the first year. That's what people don't like to admit that. So that when people talk about becoming physicians, they often will say, you don't want to major in science, because if you major in science, you're going to get C's. And if you get C's, you can't go to med school. Mm-hmm. Better to major in something else and just take the science courses you need for the MCAT. Well, that's one way of getting around the C's and getting to med school. But should it be that way? Should it be that you let in students, you admit students who must be well prepared, and yet somehow they can't get at least a B in fundamental courses. That's the fight of UMBC that we worked on for some years, and that's where we made some progress. But the same thing I would say about in the country when thinking about the future of higher education and graduation and retention rates. If it is a very prestigious institution, private or public, very prestigious, the graduation rates are going to be 85, 90 on up, because most people come in 4 years to graduate. For most of higher education, not just the 2 years, but all the 4 years, public and private, for most students, the fact is you don't graduate in 4 years. It's longer than that. We now talk about 5 and 6 year graduation rates. And we say the graduation rate in the country is somewhere between 50 and 60%. Not realizing it's not like most get that. You got all those that are from the working class group where you're well under 50%, in many cases 20 and 30% graduation rates. And then you got those at the top end. And so when it comes together, it looks like the middle. What am I saying? I'm saying the future of higher education is going to have to focus on doing a much better job in helping students to graduate when they come, other than because when they don't graduate, they're in greater debt with no skills. All right. But secondly, we're not teaching our graduates how to listen to other points of view. When you talk about the meaning of the liberal arts, why the liberal arts are important, and the liberal arts and sciences will be math and science, but certainly English, history, philosophy in those areas. And I'm talking now about the humanities and social sciences. And when people say to me, oh, Congress can't get anything done, my response to new presidents and presidents in general is, but all the people in Congress, almost all of them are our graduates. They're all graduates of our institutions. All right. And while we may like some and not like others, the fact is we haven't figured out how to help people to go across the divide, to listen, and to be able to think strategically about how to find that common ground. We have not done that well. And the question I always ask as students come across the stage at UMBC is, has this student gotten to know people different from herself? Given that we have people from all over the world, different religions, or have the students stayed only with themselves? And one of the things we don't have the courage to say is, yes, it's fine for people to have experiences with their own culture, their own religion, their own race. That's all. Of course, we appreciate the meaning of self. But if we're not figuring out how to help students from different backgrounds to hear each other and to talk to each other and to be able to agree to disagree, then we're missing the point of education. And when I think about transformation, besides wanting more students to graduate, it is the idea of having many more who are humble enough to know they've got a lot to learn from other people. And that's one of the challenges in American higher education from my perspective. Long answer.
A great answer. And I think what you're calling to now is the idea of skills, work skills. And what we're hearing from the world of work is that there is a skill gap between higher education and the demands of the workplace today. Part of those skills are listening skills and ability to work within teams and across the aisle, et cetera. But there are many other work skills that are in demand in the workplace that higher education needs to rethink its curricula and its pedagogy, its strategies in order to bridge that gap. Is this something that you're hearing also? And what do we need to do?
I think sometimes we're so influenced by media and the media's breaking news approach that we don't get to the meat, the substance of the issues. I would start by saying we should be teaching students habits of mind, a way of thinking. The people I know in corporate America who are the most powerful tend to have a liberal education. They may have majored in history or philosophy. They may have majored in mathematics, but they're broad thinkers. I start there. When we talk about our leaders, we need broad thinking. People say, oh, well, you're 60% science at UMBC. Yeah, but we're making sure students get a broad background. We're one of the few campuses still requiring a language at everybody. You said, pourquoi je parle français? That's exactly, I want people to know that languages are important. Understanding other cultures, important. But at the same time, what I would say to you is that future of work is an interesting concept. I had the privilege of serving on the MIT Commission on the Future of Work. And they were looking heavily at lower level skills. We were looking at what students would need, not so much a college degree, but the other levels, because there are many jobs. It is true. There are many jobs that will not require a bachelor's degree. Now, but when people say to me, oh, the bachelor's degree is no longer valuable, people don't believe in it, I say this: show me a family who has had someone go to college who doesn't want other people, the younger brothers and sisters, going to college. I mean, we're bursting at the seams. We got a 20-some% increase in freshmen this year. I mean, it's just, the fact is that educated people want their kids to become educated at the college level. I would also say, though, that this is a time when community colleges are more important than ever. It's part of the future, and it's only people who are older and more traditional who don't know how community colleges have been so powerful in certain states, whether talking about in California or in Florida. We've got very strong community colleges here in Maryland, but they are very important, and they are wonderful jobs one can get. Now, the future will be this. It will be this continuum, more so than we have right now. We have been rather cookie cutter in that we tell everybody, oh, you got to get a bachelor's degree, a college degree. No, I think I've learned from the Jobs for the Future initiative from 25 years ago. There are many, many opportunities for people without a bachelor's degree. And I'll just give you one particular. And so I am very proud of our relationship with community colleges, because some of those students will go straight on with a double A and get a great job. Others will decide, let me start working and go work and get a bachelor's. Others can do just fine in biotech in a lot of areas without the bachelor's. But this is the point. I would think that we need to look at the different pathways for students. We have a training company in Howard County, and we train, 6,000+ people, many of whom are not looking for a college degree. They want a certificate. It's like a badge, right? And we got these major partnerships with the Department of Defense, with certain companies. We'll give them a program for 18 months, and they can get a job making $65,000. Now, some will eventually keep going and get a bachelor's, but they've got a job already. Veterans can do that. Some have a degree in humanities who want to come back and get training in technology. I think the future of higher education will focus on what Jim Collins calls the genius of the and versus the tyranny of the or. In other words, it's not a bachelor's or other kinds of programs. It's both, depending on the needs, the age of the person, the interests of the person. And secondly, it's not STEM or something in humanities or arts and humanities. It's how do you connect the two? We're doing more and more with computing across the disciplines. As an example, data science is as heavily grounded in the social sciences as anything else, right? And so what we will see in the future will be many people taking advantage of the different pathways to doing what is important to them. Usually it's about taking care of self, job, and those kinds of things, but it's also about strong thinking skills, speaking skills, and many of those skills. So it's both habits of mind, and it's the importance of giving people options. And that's why, as a research university, UMBC respects what happens in the other spaces, including, as I said, since almost half of all Americans start in community colleges. And some of my most prestigious faculty members here, member of the National Academy of Sciences, started at a junior college in Florida. So, I mean, it's important for people to know you don't have to go to the most prestigious place to end up at the top, the most socially prestigious place. That's a part of the future. We've got to get away from that. But if you look at TV, if you get a study of where is it kids who are trying to decide on college will go, it's always to a very prestigious place in the Northeast or out in California. It doesn't talk about middle-class places. It's like we don't exist, So I'm saying it's time for people to speak up and say, listen, we matter. Community colleges matter. Public universities matter, just as private universities do also.
Mm-hmm. Well said, and I'd love to dig in a little bit more in the graduation rates issue. What seems to make the most difference in moving that needle for graduation rates?
Let's think of, believe it or not, 25 years ago, we were a typical public university. The graduation rate, 6-year graduation rate, was 35%. Well, one of the reasons was so many students come here to major in STEM, and they were flunking out. And people thought it was kids of color, but no, it was across the board. And again, the fact is, as the study that I shared for the National Academy shows, 2/3 of people don't make it in science. And often they do so poorly, they flunk out. Now, the old-fashioned way of looking at that is, it must be a really good university. It's a really strong place because most people flunk out. And yet, what we came to appreciate was, no, if you admit the students, they should have a reasonable chance of succeeding, not just in barely making it through, but succeeding in the discipline in which they're interested. So we had to rethink our focus on the students and on skills, and saying what is the minimum level of background one needs to come here and succeed in chemistry or in engineering or in the humanities, for example. And secondly, we have gone through major innovation initiatives to redesign courses from psychology to digital humanities to the Chemistry Discovery Center. The CDC on our campus doesn't stand for disease. It's the Chemistry Discovery Center. And it's much more emphasis on collaboration, use of technology, teaching students how to problem solve together, more connecting with the faculty. And that TED Talk that I talked about, that's true not only for science, but in general. High expectations of ourselves, not just the students. Building community. It takes people in the profession to pull people in, whether it's a historian or a biochemist, and then rigorous evaluation of not just of the students though, but of what are we doing. That's it. You know, I often say, if I go to the board and I put a problem on the board from differential equations, and everybody says, wow, he must be really smart. And then I give them a test and nobody passes the test based on the problem. Have I taught it? I would say obviously not. But our approach in higher education in math is you put it on the board, you give them the test, they don't pass it, then it's their problem. It's not a matter. I mean, the question is, have you taught it if the person hadn't grasped the concept? And what I'm very proud of at UMBC is that faculty really work using analytics to understand who is getting it and who's not. And what else do we need to do to help more people succeed? And how do we listen to the students, understand what they're doing? And how do we have supplemental instruction and have more students working with students? And how do we build communities of people? What we did with the Meyerhoffs, started by the founder, Bob Meyerhoff, with Minorities in Science, helped us transform the campus broadly with other groups. So we've got the Linehan Artist Scholars and the Sherman Teacher Scholars and the Sunham Public Affairs Scholars. We got all these communities of people working together, and that helps to build connected relationships, connections that lead to more people remaining and doing well. That's it. How do you keep that idea? How do you keep students from falling through the cracks? That's the big question. You do it by building community and communities within community, and using the analytics to know what's working well and what's not. That's the idea.
Money certainly helps with these things, but is it always required, or are there ways around it, around having to raise more money in order to do this well?
I think, speaking as a mathematician, I would say money is necessary but not sufficient. And now, but how much money is the question? How much money? One can do things with less money, but it does help to have more money. It really does. And unfortunately, typically in America, the rich give to the rich. It's really an exception. When Bob Meyerhoff gave us a grant, we had never had anyone give us that kind of money before, because people thought, well, it's public, they don't need it. You know, and that's a challenge in American society. And that, I don't say that to upset people, because I'm always looking for people to give to us. We are not rich. But if you look at the data, what you see is the places with the biggest endowments get obviously much more money coming in all the time. And you think about mindset in America, what does that say about what we need to do to strengthen the foundation and for all the larger numbers of people? And you do need more money. There's no way you can study biochemistry and do well if you have to wait tables 35 hours on the outside. American public policy right now in science says we'll give money to grad students, but you should be able to make it at the undergrad level. Not happening. No, not happening. No. If we didn't have scholarship money from different national agencies and from Mao Foundation, we couldn't have the students we have in the Mao program. We should be doing double or 3 times as many. We can't because we don't have the money. So my number one line when I'm working with new presidents in the Harvard program is a day without an ask is a day without sunshine. I'm asking somebody for money every day. And no does not mean never. It just means not today. So I am told no by more people in Baltimore than anybody. Wait a minute. But I say that to you to say, but there are others who've been supportive and done. But we need to look at institutions beyond the top 100 with the billions of dollars. What about the rest of us? You know, and as I get to the end of my career at UMBC, I'm saying it more and more, that American society needs to think about what it does to support working and middle class people. We know what it does for the wealthy. We know that on so many levels. And again, I am not being disparaging because my greatest donors are very wealthy and I love them dearly. But I am saying, no, we need public policy that looks at those kinds of issues.
Yeah, absolutely. So now this is about graduation rates and academic success. Then when students graduate, also their pathways are largely determined by their backgrounds and social capital. I want to share with you a quick study that I did with here at Johns Hopkins when I arrived here and started to look at students' destinations within the first year, where they go, and found alarming gaps between what we call the haves and the have-nots in how long it takes to land a job, the salary differences, and then the satisfaction with those types of jobs or the type of opportunities, or they go to graduate school. There's a lot that the universities, including ours, need to do in order to create the type of structural equity that ensures that not only students graduate in an equitable fashion, but also that they're designing their lives and their careers and are launching into pathways that ensure that they're successful, regardless of where they come from. I wonder what your thoughts about that are.
Sure. I think that universities in general need to be much more proactive in building partnerships with employers. Well, they're talking about those who are getting a bachelor's degree, and I saw in the chat somebody mentioned about the apprenticeship programs. Just an example, Maryland was the first state to have apprenticeship programs in cybersecurity. What's important about that is it was not just about our training company having the apprenticeship, but making sure there were jobs available for people when they graduate. My students whose parents work at one of the national agencies have more capital to start with just because they know how to get involved. Many have worked in summers or in high school, so they've got job ways that way. Similarly, in other kinds of companies, but students who may not have had those experiences need more support. So for us at UMBC, we are constantly working to develop strong relationships with the companies in the area, T. Rowe Price, McCormick, and others, to Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, but also companies in New York and other places, and having companies come here and meet our students. Everybody wants to meet diverse students. I'm saying, well, we got them of all types. And, look at all my students, white, black, Asian, Hispanic, Native, whatever, and see that the talent that we have. But it's up to us to open those doors, because for many people, it's just wonderful. If you're wealthy, you've got a lot of social capital. You can call a friend and say, my son needs a job. That happens all the time. I was at Wall Street. I was there with a company looking at opportunities, and I said, how do I get some of my students jobs? And the gentleman who was giving us a look around said it. He really did say this. This is in the last 5 years. He said, if the student is not the son or a nephew of somebody here right now, it's going to be really hard. So the first thing I thought about was the women in the room, because he was very clear, son or a nephew, right? And then look at me, right? When I don't see anybody looking like me there. And there we go with the structural discrimination, where the mindset, it was comfortable for him to say that to me, right? And when I brought it up to some people, they said, well, he's just saying people came from poor families. I said, but look at who they are. Look at who they are. I'm not being disparaging. I'm saying, let's look at the reality of this thing. That's the idea of the structural challenge. So what I would say is, no, it is important for universities of all types to be proactive in developing relationships with employers, so that students, whether they're in the bachelor's program, the doctoral program, apprenticeship program, certificate program, will have a pathway for being considered. We have a career fair tomorrow with 100 plus companies, and we are just insisting that students get in there and talk to people early on in the freshman year, and to get a sense of what people are looking for, whether it's about ability to look at people, to speak well, to write well, to show passion for the work, to ask good questions. They need those experiences. And we're very proud that 30-some% of my students are first generation college across races. I'm very proud of that. And we want to make sure they are as benefited as people whose parents are professors. We are a magnet for the children of professors from a lot of universities up and down the East Coast, because people know the strength of the education and that we care about those students. That's most important.
It seems to me that the challenge with everything that we've talked about during this hour so far is scale. how do we get it to scale so that every single student has access to it?
Yes.
Not only access, that it's integrated into their journey, into their experience. And I've thought for a long time that besides classes for credit, almost nothing else is scalable within higher education. It's only the courses that are for credit because that's what they have to go through in order to graduate.
Sure.
I wonder what your thoughts about that. Perhaps you'll challenge me on it, but that's what I'm constantly concerned about. That is, how do we move away as a higher education system from creating things that we invite students to come and partake in, to creating things that are integrated into the common experience, so that we scale and we don't have to constantly use more resources.
So I would say two things. We have been scaling our top program at a number of universities. That's why I want you to read my book, The Empowered University. It talks about some of this. I have no shame. Notice that. Yeah. But I would say the Mauhof now has been scaled up as an example that begins with one group of students at another university and then can go from there. But Penn State and Chapel Hill, we have replicated the Mauhof program. There's a wonderful piece that we wrote for Science about 3 years ago, showing the results after 5 or 6 years of increasing substantially the number of students of color who go on and succeed in science. And this was funded by Howard Hughes, HHMI, as an example. We are scaling Mauhof right now at both Berkeley and San Diego with funds from Chan Zuckerberg. And we scaled it at Howard. I was very proud that we did it at Howard University. And the idea is that you start with this program for one group and you learn things about collaboration. And this is not about in the classroom. This is about what happens beyond the classroom, the building of community, getting ways of helping students to learn how to problem solve, teaching them how to make sure they're aggressive in working with faculty, getting them into labs or other places. And what's nice about that is it's not just for that group of students. It's giving faculty a chance to think about how to change the culture of the institution. That is the idea, it seems to me, that is more important than others. I'll give you another example. I was the PI on our advanced grant for women faculty in science from NSF, and that was several millions of dollars. People said, but you're a man. I say, yeah, but men should be as concerned about the paucity of women in science and engineering as anybody, because it's an American issue. It's not just a women's issue. Just as people who are not minorities should be as concerned about minorities being in these areas, because they are human and American issues. And so, and we were able to increase substantially the number of women faculty in science and engineering. I had several PIs, women chairs of departments, but that NSF advanced program has been scaled at Michigan and at a number of MIT and a number of universities. So you can scale for faculty. And the recommendation that we made in our National Academies report is we need the same kind of program for faculty of color as we've had for women. The women's program is working. We need to keep working on the women's issue, but we have not made that kind of progress for Blacks and Latinos. And that's about looking at best practices, looking at how you change the culture, talking across institutions about what can be done. Let me give you just one more example. There's a piece in Issues in Science and Technology that my colleagues wrote in the last few weeks showing the top 30 institutions in producing Latinos who go on to get PhDs in STEM, natural science and engineering, and the top ones for African Americans. And I've told you our position is number one. But the key is we say this: if we could scale up what we're doing by doubling the number of students coming out of those top 30 institutions, okay, we would increase the number of PhDs, Latinos and Blacks, by 30% for the whole country, just by doubling the top 30, right? And then if you add on to that a program for scaling by having those institutions working with somebody else, you can begin to scale. So that is my argument to national agencies right now, because we've not moved the needle. One statistic, 10 years ago when we chaired the Committee on Underrepresentation, when Dr. Henderson and I, the fact is 2.2% of all the PhDs in natural sciences and engineering went to Blacks. That was 10 years ago, 2.2%. Today it's 2.3%. So in 10 years, with a lot of talk and everybody saying George Floyd and all racism and all that, we have not moved at 1% in 10 years. Okay. And that's my calling out the truth. And that's, so we have to have, it seems to me, more substantive conversations using the data and being honest and calling out what's working and what's not working. I'm very proud that Hopkins got a big grant and run is put the money on producing more Blacks, for example, minorities in STEM at the PhD level. And several of us, my campus as a minority serving, and several of the HBCUs are working with. So I'm very proud of Hopkins for doing that. Very much so.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I wonder in the last few minutes that we have, if you have any reflections or thoughts about the Great Resignation as something that is reshaping the workforce now in America. It's hitting us as employers in the universities, but it's also hitting the world of work that we work with. I'm sure you're observing it as a president of UMBC, and perhaps you're dealing with some challenges there too, as we are, in retaining staff and faculty.
Yes, this sounds shameless when you say it, but we were just named by the Chronicle as one of those great colleges to work for. We're very proud of that, and yes, we got mentioned in all the categories. And when the paper called and said, well, why is it that you were mentioned and others? I said, well, I think all the universities are doing a lot to support faculty and students. I mean, everybody's doing a lot. Here's the difference for my colleagues. We want everybody to know it's a great place, right? It's not just a matter of yes, things are going pretty well and some people leaving whatever. People fill out the surveys saying, no, you want to come work at UMBC. It's a great place, right? Not that we're perfect and there's more to be done. But the reason we keep being at the top in the country is there's this excitement among colleagues, faculty and staff saying, no, people are reasonable here. People are reasonable. Come and look at us. And they understand the more we say that, the better the quality of people who want to be here. People want to be at UMBC. Now, do people leave sometimes? Yes. But when you see where they go, they're getting these incredible offers. And we will say they're taking the UMBC spirit with them. That's what I say in my book. For years, I get upset when people would leave. Now, though, I say something different. What I say is they're taking that UMBC story with them, and they're pulling some of my students to grad programs from MIT to NYU and other places. And so it's mindset. It really is mindset a great deal. And this is a period, as we're saying in this new book with Hopkins Press, that we have to learn how to deal with uncertainty. We are still learning how to work on uncertainty. We don't know what's happening with commencements on campuses. We don't know how long we'll have to have the mask on. And how do we create a culture that gets people to live with that in such a way that we keep reinforcing and supporting each other? We don't know how much mental health challenges people are having right now. How do we show people we care about our students, but also faculty and staff? This is what my colleagues are saying right now. We've got to find more ways of seeing how people are doing, because people are having some anxiety, not knowing what's going to happen with COVID on our campuses right now. So that, it seems to me, the more we care and the more we talk about caring and wanting to hear what people are saying, and not just hear it, but then try to take some actions, the better off we'll be.
Wow, wonderful closing words. I cannot believe I just spent this hour talking with you and listening to you, especially. I've followed your career for so long. And I know that you are aware that you are a role model and an icon for so many in higher education and beyond. And certainly you have been to me. And I could not believe that, first of all, you accepted to be our guest for this premiere of season 4. And I learned so much from you today. So I'm so grateful for the time that you spent with us today, President Hrabowski. You are about to retire. I think you just announced your retirement as president. Yes. I wonder if you have some final reflections and thoughts about this decision, about where you're headed, about what you wish for the world of education and the world in general.
Sure. First of all, my students have told me to be sure and say, Doc, you're not retiring from life. Wait a minute. First of all, you're retiring from UMBC. I should have said that. I just said I'm retiring. I'm retiring from my beloved UMBC, and it will always be in my blood, in my heart. I just love this place. It's amazing. But I've got so much work to do. I worked at Harvard. I worked with new presidents there, but I'm working with boards and presidents from Penn State to Wellesley to Ohio State, going down to work with the HBCUs in Atlanta with Spelman and Morehouse and other places. And so the nice news is people call on me to give support to leaders and to talk about what matters. And what is it that matters? Authenticity. People can tell in a heartbeat. Students can, others, if you're real, if what you say you truly believe, and if it's not just about you. That's what I want leadership to know. It's not about me. No, it's about the incredible community that has lifted us up here at UMBC and what other institutions do. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
That's great. A callback to SNL skit. I love it. And we didn't get a chance to speak French today, mais je vous remercie.
Je suis très impressionné, monsieur.
C'était un plaisir de vous parler aujourd'hui, and I hope we will get to meet someday in person. I will reach out when things are a little safer, and hope that we will get the chance to connect in person. Thank you.
Yes.
Merci beaucoup.
Vous devez visiter UMBC avec mes étudiants.
D'accord. C'est promis. C'est promis. Thank you so much, President Hrabowski. I want to thank all of you for joining us today. And remember what I always say, the only vision that matters is the one that you create. Thank you so much for joining us, and see you next time.
Félicitations, monsieur.
Merci beaucoup, Président Hrabowski. À la prochaine. Thank you.
Au revoir.
Bye-bye.